Eleonore, I've been interested in the Bible in my life. I've studied Hebrew as my background. I've studied the New Testament exegetically early in my life. And if I want to really try to understand the Bible, what I sometimes try to do is use the principles of philosophy to analyze different fields. Philosophy of science, I'm very interested in philosophy of mind, philosophy of cosmology, ways to use philosophical thinking to dissect the essence of different fundamentals of an area. So as a philosopher, as someone who is obviously committed to the Bible as a Christian, how would you do that? How would you create a philosophy, if you will, of the Bible?
Well, see, you want to ask in all these cases what philosophy of something comes to.
Yes.
So what's philosophy of biology? What's philosophy of chemistry? We now have the start of really interesting philosophy of chemistry. What's that supposed to be?
Right.
Well, in all these cases, what you've got is you've got some basic discipline that produces data. Biology gives us a lot of information about biology. Chemistry gives us a lot of information about chemistry. Okay, and then what good is philosophy? I mean, if you've got chemistry, what do you need a philosopher for? And what you need a philosopher for is to show you what the implications are of what chemistry is telling you. Mm-hmm. And also to help chemistry maybe do its job a little bit better. So one thing that philosophers of chemistry are really interested in is this. What's the relationship between a whole and its parts? Mm-hmm. Is a whole nothing but the sum of its parts? Or is a whole something greater than the sum of its parts? Is a water molecule just hydrogen and oxygen? Or is it something different from, one oxygen, two hydrogen, summed? And if it is something different, then is there something about chemistry that shows us how you can have a completely naturalistic system, a physicalistic system, and yet have top-down causation, where the electrons move where they move because the molecule as a whole moves where it moves. So what philosophers can do is start with the data of chemistry. What does chemistry teach us about a water molecule? And from that data, teach us something about metaphysics that we wouldn't have known otherwise. And the metaphysics will then help the chemists do something about their job better also. See what I mean?
Correct.
So that's the way philosophy of chemistry or philosophy of biology works. Philosophy of theology works the same way. Philosophical theology starts with the data of theology, does its philosopher's thing on that data in a way that should help theology and should enrich philosophy. That's what it does. Now, in the case of the Bible, we have exactly the same thing, except that we've got a very much more complicated set of data. It's more complicated, not least because a whole lot of it consists of stories. How do you do a philosopher's thing about stories? Mm-hmm. Well, in the same way you do the philosopher's thing about chemistry. You start with the data of the story, and then you try to understand, as a philosopher, what the story has to teach you. So consider, for example, the book of Job. Commonly what we say about the book of Job is it depicts a righteous, innocent, adult human being suffering terribly for no reason. And when Job, the sufferer, wants to know why he's suffering and asks God why he's suffering, God won't give him an answer. But if you think about this story philosophically, what you can see is that Job has the longest, most intense face-to-face conversation with God of any character anywhere in the Bible. And Job's problem is not a philosopher's problem of evil. What justifies God in allowing the suffering of innocents? Job's problem is personal. Why are you doing this to me? And when you have a suffering like that, where what it prompts in you is a question, why did you do this to me? Then the most powerful response is not a philosophical treatise on the problem of evil, but it's the face of the person you're accusing coming to you to sort it out with you. And then, here's the other interesting part. There is information that comes to you in face-to-face conversation that you cannot reproduce well in propositional form. So, you know, if my son calls me up and says, Mom, I've met somebody and you need to like her, you know, I'm going to want to hear all about her. And when I've heard all about her, I'm not done. I want to see her. And why? Because I'm going to learn a lot more by seeing her than I will just by the stories about her. And in the same way, what Job says to God is, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my own eye sees you. And when he sees God in this way, what he says is, I back off my accusations and my lament. What he sees there is sufficient for him to solve the problem of evil because he sees him. That's a way of thinking about the problem of evil that we would not have without the story. But the story wouldn't be what it is if philosophers weren't thinking about it in philosopher fashion. See, noticing that we get information from second-person experience that we don't get without it, for example. So in that way, you can definitely have philosophy of the Bible also, and it's rich and it's profitable.